Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining me in this presentation of my personal educational philosophy statement. My name is Drew Hulton-Smith. I'm a pre-service teacher undertaking my first year of a Bachelor of Education at Griffith University with a major in secondary education and a focus on marine sciences. Throughout this presentation, which will refer to the theories and strategies of a number of relevant educational philosophers, I will be emphasising the concepts proposed by Kurt Hahn and Paulo Freire in the context of historical, philosophical, legislative, policy and practice frameworks underpinning contemporary education. The infinite diversity of society and accordingly the diversity within the classroom and the broader school community must be recognised, and factors such as gender, family form, socioeconomic background, and cultural identity must be analysed and included if a philosophy of education is to enable social justice. That is to say, a commitment to challenging social, cultural and economic inequalities imposed on individuals arising from any differential distribution of power, resources and privilege. But before it's possible to make a clear statement of my present philosophical views, which will inevitably change in accordance with my own personal and professional development throughout the undergraduate program and my ongoing teaching career, I feel it is essential to reflect upon some of the formative experiences and defining attributes of my development thus far. My own schooling was a long time ago, and now I acknowledge the privileged position I held to be able to attend United World College in Singapore through the 1980s. An international school with 42 different nationalities speaking over a dozen languages within the student body. Founded by Kurt Hahn in 1962, United World College also embraced and practiced the ideals of the outward bound movement, and this element of my own education would prove to be critical in both my career trajectory and developing my philosophy as an educator. Hahn wrote relatively little, however, his words and thoughts have been transcribed from his numerous lectures, consistent with his belief in the living of ideas and experiencing and implementing them for himself. One of my favourite quotes attributed to Hahn has a deep personal resonance with me, and I believe clearly illustrates the key reasoning of his educational philosophy. The notion of sailing has been used extensively, both metaphorically and literally, to communicate ideals of teamwork and interdependence. And Hahn, who strongly supported sailing through the United World College, Outward Bound, and Duke of Edinburgh Award movements, is quoted, "An eminent man challenged me to explain what sailing in a schooner could do for international education. In reply, I said we had at that moment an application before us for a future king of an Arab country to enter the school. I happened to have at the school some Jews, and if the Arab and one of those Jews were to go out sailing on our schooner, perhaps in a northeasterly gale, and if they were to become thoroughly seasick together, I would have done something for international education." Now, analysing the quote I just read from Hahn, it's not written in high-order academic language. It is not a deep philosophical analysis of the nature of being. It is not a key principle to guide one's life. What it is largely a layman's anecdote based upon genuine circumstance. What it does is reveal quite clearly many of the differences or elements of diversity, most notably a seemingly irreconcilable conflict of religion, which, if managed well, can be seen not as an obstacle or hindrance, rather as an opportunity to facilitate growth, understanding, compassion, tolerance, and empathy. These are the key traits of character that I will seek to instill in my students, by acknowledging and accepting our differences and embracing our diversity. It was through my involvement with the sailing programs at United World College that opportunities were presented and my interests and passions were encouraged, allowing me to pursue a career as a professional sailor. And for the last 3 decades, I've worked in most every aspect of the sport and the industry. However, it was as a teacher, trainer, and assessor that I found my true niche, a vocation where I was able to provide exceptional service to my students and gain tremendous personal satisfaction, a process of true self-actualization. It was also through my involvement with the sailing and outward bound programs at United World College that the seed was first planted to become a secondary school teacher, where I first began to envision what that would look like, effectively how my teaching philosophy would manifest itself. Of all the tangible outcomes of my education, The most valuable to me is not my International Baccalaureate diploma. It's a handwritten letter from the headmaster from 1992, which includes the statement, "As an outstanding sailor, you have been able to inspire others, and on the Outward Bound weeks, your help was invaluable. Since you enjoy such a good relationship with tutors and younger children, have you ever considered a career in teaching?" Now, Hahn believed that school should be a preparation for life, not just for university, and that education should help students to develop resilience and the ability to experience failure as well as success. And upon reflection, with the benefit of considerable passage of time, I can conclude that the values, beliefs, and principles that I currently hold might be attributed to my own school experiences, although I was entirely unaware of their significance at the time. The pedagogy and curriculum which defined my education was to have implications well beyond graduation, a fact which was incomprehensible then, but absolutely clear to me now. This principle of the long-term or even lifetime influence that educators are capable of wielding is one which I can never forget, and one which I must constantly remind myself of when applying and constantly reassessing my own educational philosophy. Whilst my analysis of Hahn in the determination of my educational philosophy is largely reflective and ongoing, I would now like to consider the ideas of Paulo Freire to assist in composing and projecting my tenets from this moment onwards. The writings and philosophy of Freire are new to me, and whilst they largely complement and supplement my pre-existing beliefs, they have introduced some new ways of conceptualizing and managing my teaching to best address physical, cognitive, social, and emotional development within my students. Freire developed a theory relating the factors of oppression, literacy, and praxis in his 1967 text, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where he rejected the traditional model of banking education, whereby the teacher was seen as the holder of all knowledge, in a position superior to the student, who is merely a passive, empty receptacle and holding none. He then drew parallels between the teacher-student relationship and the socio-economic political conflict between the oppressor and the oppressed. Acting towards the goal of increasing humanity, Freire rejected the hierarchical teacher-student model in favour of the critical pedagogy model, a democratic relationship where the teacher and student exist with equality, and Freire proposed the system of problem-posing education, requiring cooperative work by all parties to implement change. Ultimately, the entire philosophy was underpinned by the need for dialogue based on solidarity, equality, and respect. And while I am cognizant of much of the criticism of Freire's work, for that matter, the criticism of all philosophical thinkers and writers, I believe that his model of critical pedagogy is an appropriate viewpoint to adopt in formulating an educational philosophy aimed at achieving social justice. A foundation of respect and open dialogue with clear acknowledgement of the oppression that exists and a conscious willingness to act towards equality is a key belief in my own philosophy statement. So why is an academic philosophy necessary? I believe that by considering and adopting the philosophical views of thinkers such as Hahn, Freire, and others, it helps establish the foundation upon which the processes and pedagogies of education can be delivered with consistency, fairness, and social justice. Established and documented standards such as the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers and the Australian National Curriculum are of course essential in determining what and when we teach, but it does very little to prescribe how and, most importantly, why we teach the way we do. An educational philosophy must dovetail seamlessly and integrally with these legislative and policy frameworks at all levels. In summary, I make this statement today acknowledging that it will be and must be subject to review and change as circumstances and society also changes. I acknowledge that my past experience was critical in forming my own key beliefs, many of which will endure for my lifetime, and in the same way, I'm conscious that my philosophy and the way I engage as a teacher will have potentially lifelong impacts upon my students. I believe that every aspect of teaching and learning should be seen as part of preparation for life itself, and finally, I believe that acknowledgement, acceptance, and embracing of differences is the underpinning value which enables communication, empathy and progress in an environment of equality and social justice. Thank you for taking the time to hear my statement, and never stop learning.